The calm and predictability of Santerville are about to be disrupted in a way no one could have anticipated. The Graysons, a family that has long been admired for their community involvement and hospitality, find themselves at the epicenter of an unfolding drama. On a seemingly ordinary September morning, the routine of this tight-knit family breaks suddenly, marking the beginning of a perplexing mystery. Thomas Grayson, known for his dependable nature and successful business, and Laura, dedicated entirely to her family, face a situation that no parent ever wants to imagine. Their daughter Alice, who has always been the light of their life, fails to show up for her classes after being dropped off at school. This alarming news disrupts the peace not only of their home, but of the entire community. As hours turn into days without any sign of Alice, the town's serene facade begins to crack. Questions arise and suspicions deepen, casting shadows over the lives of the Graysons and pulling the whole town into a vortex of uncertainty. The search for Alice not only tests the resilience of her family, but also challenges the bonds that hold the community of Santerville together. The disappearance of Alice Grayson begins on a day that starts like any other in the Grayson household, but quickly spirals into a parent's worst nightmare. After a typical morning filled with the usual rush to get ready, Thomas Grayson drives Alice to school, a daily ritual that represents a precious father-daughter moment. However, when Alice fails to attend any of her morning classes, the routine is shattered. The school's call to Laura midday is the first signal that something is terribly wrong. Initially dismissed as a possible misunderstanding, the situation grows increasingly dire as more information, or rather the lack of it, comes to light. Alice, it seems, has vanished between the car drop-off and her first class. The realization that Alice is missing sends Thomas rushing back from his work commitments in a neighboring city. Both parents are thrown into a state of frantic action, reaching out to Alice's friends, her teachers, and anyone who might have seen anything that could explain her sudden disappearance. The community of Santerville, previously a model of tranquility and safety, now buzzes with concern and the urgent need to find one of their own. As the hours tick by without any trace of Alice, the initial confusion at her disappearance turns into a deep, community-wide panic. Thomas and Laura's concern escalates as they spearhead a desperate search, calling on neighbors, setting up a command center at their home, and coordinating with local law enforcement. The tranquility of Santerville is replaced by a palpable tension that hangs over the town like a heavy fog. Neighbors who had started the day with friendly waves and casual conversations now come together in a show of solidarity, their faces marked by concern. The streets of Santerville, usually quiet and safe, buzz with the activity of volunteers and police officers combing the area for any sign of Alice. Flyers with her photo are quickly printed and distributed. Urgent appeals are made on local media, and an impromptu vigil is organized in the town square. As night falls, the reality of the situation settles in. The town that never worried about locking its doors is now locked down in a collective vigil, hoping for any news that might bring Alice back home safely. The initial response from the Graysons and the community reflects a blend of urgency and dread, holding on to hope against the creeping fear of the unknown. As the hours tick by without any trace of Alice, the initial confusion at her disappearance turns into a deep, community-wide panic. Thomas and Laura's concern escalates as they spearhead a desperate search, calling on neighbors, setting up a command center at their home, and coordinating with local law enforcement. The tranquility of Santerville is replaced by a palpable tension that hangs over the town like a heavy fog. Neighbors who had started the day with friendly waves and casual conversations now come together in a show of solidarity, their faces marked by concern. The streets of Santerville, usually quiet and safe, buzz with the activity of volunteers and police officers combing the area for any sign of Alice. Flyers with her photo are quickly printed and distributed. Urgent appeals are made on local media, and an impromptu vigil is organized in the town square. As night falls, the reality of the situation settles in. The town that never worried about locking its doors is now locked down in a collective vigil, hoping for any news that might bring Alice back home safely. The initial response from the Graysons and the community reflects a blend of urgency and dread, holding on to hope against the creeping fear of the unknown. As days pass with no significant leads or breakthroughs, the investigation begins to uncover tensions and hidden strains within the Grayson household. Publicly, the Graysons have always appeared to be a united and loving family, but the pressure of the ongoing search begins to reveal cracks in that facade. Police interviews with friends, neighbors, and relatives bring to light that not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Chief Miller and his team start to dig deeper into the family dynamics, particularly focusing on the relationships between Thomas, Laura, and Alice. Some neighbors hint at hearing occasional late-night arguments coming from the Grayson house, suggesting underlying issues that were not visible to the wider community. Others recall seeing changes in Laura's demeanor over recent months, less outgoing, more withdrawn, which they had put down to stress or personal issues. The police probe into these aspects, looking for any motive or internal family conflict that might explain Alice's disappearance. They consider all possibilities, from a runaway scenario driven by hidden family tensions to more sinister theories involving foul play. Each new revelation adds complexity to the case, as the investigators work to untangle the web of relationships and secrets within the Grayson family. The disappearance of Alice Grayson not only galvanizes the police, but also stirs the Santerville community into an unprecedented wave of cooperation and solidarity. Residents, who until now lived peacefully beside one another, are now united in a common cause: finding Alice. Local businesses and schools contribute resources, and volunteers from all corners of the town come forward to assist in the search. Organized search parties begin to sweep through the nearby woods and along the riverbanks, places where children like Alice might wander off to. The town's community center serves as a volunteer hub where people gather daily to coordinate search efforts, distribute flyers, and share updates. Local radio stations and social media platforms are flooded with messages urging people to keep an eye out for any sign of Alice. This collective effort is a testament to the tight-knit nature of Santerville. It's a place where personal tragedies are felt by everyone, pulling the community closer together in times of crisis. As the search stretches into weeks, the resolve of the volunteers never wavers, with the community holding on to hope and continuing their tireless efforts to find Alice and bring some sense of peace back to their shaken town. As the investigation into Alice Grayson's disappearance presses forward, the Santerville police encounter several setbacks that challenge their progress and test their resolve. The malfunctioning school surveillance camera that failed to capture Alice's arrival at school becomes a significant obstacle, eliminating a vital piece of potential evidence. This absence of footage leaves a gaping hole in the timeline of events, forcing investigators to rely more on eyewitness accounts, which are sparse and often contradictory. Adding to the complexities, the initial leads and tips from the community begin to dry up, and the clues that once seemed promising lead nowhere. Each new trail explored by the police, be it a sighting reported by a local or a suspicious activity noted near the Grayson home, fizzles out, leaving the team grappling for more tangible evidence. The emotional toll of these dead ends weighs heavily on both the Grayson family and the investigative team. As weeks turn into months with little progress, frustration and fatigue set in. Despite the dedicated efforts of Chief Miller and his team, the lack of breakthroughs stirs a growing sense of despair and helplessness among all those involved, casting a shadow over the once hopeful momentum of the investigation. As the search for Alice continues with few leads, scrutiny begins to intensify around Thomas Grayson. The police, driven by the need for answers, delve deeper into his personal and professional life. It soon becomes clear that Thomas's construction business, once thought to be thriving, is teetering on the brink of financial ruin. Investigators uncover that he had been masking significant debts, hidden from both his family and the broader community. Further inquiry reveals troubling interactions between Thomas and several questionable figures in the construction industry. These individuals, known to have dubious backgrounds, had been in contact with Thomas more frequently in the months leading up to Alice's disappearance. The police examined these relationships closely, suspecting that the pressure from these connections may have influenced events surrounding Alice. The discovery of these financial and personal pressures paints a complex picture of Thomas, contradicting the community's previously unblemished view of him. This new angle propels the investigation in a direction that questions whether the stress of his crumbling business and external pressures may have led to circumstances contributing to Alice's disappearance. As each layer of Thomas's life is peeled back, the facade of the perfect family man begins to crumble, revealing a web of secrets and lies that shocks everyone involved. A pivotal turn in the case occurs when a local resident stumbles upon a chilling scene in a secluded part of the forest near Santerville. While walking a rarely used trail, the resident discovers what appears to be personal items scattered in a clearing: an old, weathered backpack, school books, and a faded jacket. Recognizing the jacket as similar to the one Alice Grayson was last seen wearing, the resident immediately contacts the police. Chief Miller and his team rush to the site, hearts heavy with the possibility of what this discovery could mean. The area is quickly cordoned off as a crime scene, and a meticulous search begins. Investigators comb through every inch of the forest floor, collecting potential evidence and documenting the scene. The presence of Alice's belongings in such a remote location provides a grim clue that she may have been brought there under distressing circumstances. This discovery significantly shifts the focus of the investigation, providing the first concrete evidence related to Alice's disappearance. It galvanizes the police force and renews urgency in the community, sparking new leads and theories about what might have happened to Alice after she was last seen. The finding in the forest opens up a new chapter in the investigation, filled with both hope for answers and the dread of what those answers might reveal. Following the grim discovery in the forest, the police refocus their efforts and decide to bring Thomas Grayson in for further interrogation. The atmosphere is tense as Thomas is subjected to hours of intense questioning, with detectives pressing him on his last known actions before Alice's disappearance and his connections with dubious individuals. Chief Miller, leveraging the mounting evidence and the psychological pressure, probes deeper into Thomas's motives and state of mind at the time. Under the relentless questioning and faced with the evidence found in the forest, Thomas's composure begins to crack. He starts to reveal more about the pressures he was facing: financial burdens, threats from criminal contacts, and fears about his family's safety. These admissions lead to a shocking confession. Thomas discloses that in a moment of desperation, he was involved in a scheme that he thought would solve his financial woes, but spiraled out of control. This confession marks a crucial breakthrough in the case, shifting the narrative from a simple disappearance to a more complex and sinister plot. The detectives, now armed with Thomas's confession, work to piece together the details and implications of his actions, determining the extent of his involvement and identifying any other parties who might be implicated in the disappearance of Alice. With Thomas Grayson's confession in hand, the investigation enters a new phase as the details of the plot begin to unravel. Thomas reveals that he was approached by an old acquaintance, Edward Harper, who proposed a desperate and dark plan. This plan involves staging Alice's disappearance to claim a substantial insurance payout, which Thomas initially resisted but ultimately agreed to under immense financial and emotional pressure. As Thomas lays out the intricacies of their scheme, the police start to understand the depths of deceit involved. It becomes clear that Edward had manipulated Thomas's vulnerabilities to his advantage, pushing him towards a path that led to his own daughter's peril. The detectives learn that on the day of Alice's disappearance, instead of dropping her off at school, Thomas drove her to a predetermined location where Edward was waiting. This revelation sends shockwaves through the Santerville Police Department and the community. The police swiftly move to locate and apprehend Edward Harper, piecing together his whereabouts and connections to other criminal activities in the area. This part of the investigation focuses on gathering all related evidence to build a solid case against both Thomas and Edward, ensuring that all aspects of their plan are brought to light and justice is served for Alice. The case culminates in a high-profile court trial that captures the attention of not just Santerville, but also the national media. The courtroom is packed daily as the community and reporters hang on every piece of testimony and evidence presented by the prosecution. Thomas Grayson and Edward Harper face multiple charges, including kidnapping and conspiracy, with the prosecution laying out a detailed account of their plan and the roles each man played. Throughout the trial, the prosecution presents a compelling narrative, supported by the evidence gathered from the forest, Thomas's confession, and a series of communications between him and Edward. Witnesses, including forensic experts, family members, and acquaintances, testify to the character and actions of the accused, painting a picture of desperation and deceit. The defense attempts to mitigate Thomas's involvement, portraying him as a victim of Edward's manipulation and his own dire financial straits. However, the jury remains unconvinced of his lack of culpability. After a tense deliberation, the verdict is delivered. Both Thomas and Edward are found guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupts in a mix of relief and sorrow as the sentences are handed down: life imprisonment for Thomas and a harsher penalty for Edward, given his role as the mastermind. The conviction marks a somber resolution to a saga that had gripped the town for months. For Santerville, the trial offers closure on a painful chapter, though the scars of the ordeal will linger in the community's collective memory. The outcome also serves as a stark reminder of how quickly trust can be eroded and lives shattered by acts of desperation. In the wake of the trial and convictions, Laura Grayson finds herself navigating a profoundly altered reality. Stripped of her husband and the truth about his actions revealed, she grapples with a complex mix of betrayal, grief, and relief. The once warm and vibrant home that Laura shared with her family now stands as a quiet monument to her profound losses and the deception that shattered her life. Left alone in the aftermath, Laura struggles to reconcile the image of the man she loved with his unforgivable actions. Her days are filled with efforts to rebuild some semblance of normalcy, yet the emptiness of her daughter's absence permeates every moment. The community, while supportive, is also a constant reminder of the tragedy, prompting Laura to make the difficult decision to sell her home. Seeking a fresh start, Laura moves away from Santerville, hoping to find a place where the weight of her past does not loom so large. She engages in therapy and joins support groups for families affected by similar tragedies, finding solace in the shared experiences and understanding of others. Though the journey is fraught with challenges, Laura slowly begins to forge a path forward, determined to honor her daughter's memory by living a life that seeks peace and healing. The ordeal of Alice Grayson's disappearance and the subsequent trial leave a lasting mark on Santerville, reshaping the community's identity and altering its residents' sense of security. The once tranquil town is now tinged with a wariness, a reminder of the vulnerability that came to light in the wake of the tragedy. Neighbors who once interacted with carefree openness now approach each other with a cautious empathy, mindful of the hidden struggles that may lie beneath the surface. Local authorities respond to the heightened community anxiety by increasing their presence and engaging more actively with residents, establishing new safety protocols and communication channels. Schools implement more rigorous safety measures and counseling services to support students and staff affected by the case. Community leaders and local organizations rally to restore the town's spirit, organizing events and workshops focused on healing and resilience. Churches and community centers become venues for vigils and meetings where townspeople can share their feelings and find mutual support. Despite these efforts, the fabric of Santerville is permanently altered. The story of Alice Grayson becomes a cautionary tale, a narrative woven into the community's collective consciousness, urging a reevaluation of the values and trust that once seemed unshakable. Yet, through this challenging transformation, Santerville slowly begins to find a new way forward, fostering a more vigilant and tightly knit community committed to ensuring that such a tragedy never occurs again. As Santerville gradually comes to terms with the past, the community begins to focus on reflection and moving forward. This process involves a deep rethinking of community bonds and the initiation of programs aimed at strengthening neighborhood ties and ensuring safety for all its members. Town hall meetings, once routine check-ins, now serve as vital forums for dialogue on preventive measures and the welfare of the community's youth. Education programs are launched to help residents recognize and address signs of distress in families and among youths. These programs also encourage openness, aiming to break the stigmas around discussing mental health and financial struggles, which were underlying themes in the tragedy of the Grayson family. Efforts to beautify the town and revitalize its public spaces are embraced as part of the healing process. These initiatives not only improve the physical environment, but also help lift community spirits, promoting a sense of pride and collective effort towards recovery. Meanwhile, Laura Grayson, far from the town that holds so many painful memories, embarks on her own personal journey of healing. She engages with communities that focus on rebuilding lives after personal tragedies, using her experience to help others navigate their paths through grief. Santerville's reflection on the past and its proactive steps forward manifest as a renewed commitment to safeguarding its residents, fostering a culture of mutual care and vigilance. This new chapter for the town is marked by a collective determination to learn from its painful history and to emerge stronger, ensuring that the legacy of what happened is one of growth and resilience.